Then when it comes to like the AI side of things, um, I actually think AI makes resale fraud more enabled because now you've got like agents that can browse ticketing sites without being detected.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased. Joining me from the US, Ritesh Patel. He's the CEO and co-founder of Ticket Fairy. I don't like to steal much of my guests' time. I keep them, for themselves to introduce. Of course, we're gonna talk about like ticketing, as you can imagine. But Ritesh is an entrepreneur and a lot of experience. And for my audience here in the Middle East, he's familiar also with the market here also as well. So again, without further ado, Ritesh, thank you very much for being here with me today. Tell us a little more about you, your background, your journey, and what you're currently up to, and then we can start the discussion from there. So the floor is yours.
Nice to be here, Mehmet. I guess the best way to describe Ticket Fairy is not just ticketing. We built a full operating system for the independent events industry. So it's everything from the ticketing to safe resale to a CRM to marketing tech to originally kind of operational elements of events, but we've just extended that really broadly with a full AI stack and also embedded fintech. So we evolve almost every week when it comes to the technology.
Great. Ritesh, like you've built both sides, event production and now building the tech. So what did you understand about the problem that pushed you like many other founders to start building in that space?
So I've been building products since I was a kid, but the the event production side kind of grabbed me when I first got to college, and I started running events mainly just because it was interesting, but ended up building a pretty well-known events brand and doing everything from like the talent booking to the marketing to kind of like brand ethos to just like the venue production and everything in between. So like when you've done that for a while, like I did like more than 10 years of events and produced about 500 individual events. You kind of learn that it's a really painful industry. The technology is very unsophisticated, revenue is unreliable, and you're kind of you can't predict what will happen on the night, and so it's just a very tough industry. And when I started working in ad tech, uh, it kind of became apparent that you could build sophisticated online marketing tools to help drive revenue. So that's why we started the company.
Great. Now, if we want to kind of tear down, and go more deep into the because you said yeah, it's not just the ticketing part, but things on the surface sometimes looks simple, but there are like actually a lot of complexities in the background. So, what are like these complexities that most people underestimate in that space?
I mean, so I'll give you an example of this is actually really funny. Someone I had a call with recently, uh, they knew that we were speaking, and so they went to the website and on the call they were like, "Oh, it looks like you built your website in WordPress." And I was like, "Yeah, everything looks really simple, but we actually run engineering 20 hours a day and have done for years and years and years. And basically, I mean, I guess it's like the first time Google launched and it was like, oh, it's a white page with a simple text box. How complex can that be? Until you realize that like they were scraping the entire web and building these like really complex algorithms to get the results, right? And so like
Hmm.
with us, it's a lot of complexity hidden away because every event's business, each sector of events is completely different. And so, and every business has a different way of structuring their workflows, their pricing, their logic. And so we learned over time that like you can't do custom dev for every single client. So we basically had to build the platform so that It was just an entire series of feature flags and switches that you could just turn on and off or give parameters to for each client. So you kind of you build, even when you're doing custom build for clients, you hide it behind a feature flag, you refine it, then it becomes generally available for everyone else. So the entire platform is basically like 1,000 different feature flags, and then global payment gateway into integrations, multi-currency, time zone conversion for all reporting per event location. It's super, super complex.
Right. Ritesh, let's talk also about some of the challenges. So we know scalping and fraud have existed for decades, and your industry wasn't like other industry safe from people trying to get things the bad way. Let's call it in these terms. Now, what changed recently that makes AI actually effective against fighting against like scalping and fraud, in your opinion?
So, I mean, when we tried to fix the kind of resale issues in the industry, we did it in what I think is quite an obvious way, but maybe other people don't think it's obvious, which is basically insist on names on every ticket, and then have the event organizer validate those names at the entrance. And then if you wanted to transfer ownership of, even like individual tickets within an order, we built this peer-to-peer resale system where you could just go into the order and say, hey, I want to sell my ticket to Mehmet, and then you would get an invitation with a secure buy link. You go to the website, put your credit card information in, pay the amount for the ticket, and I'm not allowed to make a profit. So you have to, I only get back what I paid, and so you would then pay that on the site, and then once your payment's confirmed, I get an email saying my ticket's been sold, my card's been refunded, my QR code's been cancelled, and you have a fresh one that I can't use anymore. And we've not actually directly transferred money between each other. It's just that you've paid the system, I've got a refund, it nets out to zero, and it's super safe. So we launched that in 2014, really, really early. And then when it comes to like the AI side of things, um, I actually think AI makes resale fraud more enabled because now you've got like agents that can browse ticketing sites without being detected. Like, the standard bot detection techniques don't work on AI agents that can browse using like residential IPs and actually open up a real browser, and they're not like, you know, using the standard like APIs to like navigate a page. They can pretend to move the mouse around. They can like have variation, and every single browsing session can be unique, and you can't detect that. So it actually makes it worse.
Oh, yeah. With the agents that we are seeing popping up every day, this is a real challenge because they can act as humans because they're using your sessions, they're using your browser. It's not like they're trying to do things that looks automatic, I would say. So it's a challenge. Now, you mentioned in the introduction, Ritesh, like you are building a complete suite platform for the event industry, right? So it's
Yeah.
not just the buying the ticket, it's include the payment gateways, it includes, everything related, the CRM and so on. Now, how much this is important from both a technical and business, point of view to establish the trust layer because speaking with a lot of people who at least here in Dubai, we hear about people that sometimes they see something and they don't trust to go and buy, or for example
Hmm.
um events that so the organizers they are like well known, but actually sometimes it looks so true to so good to be true, and so on. So how much is important to have this complete end-to-end trust when we talk about operating live events from a technology perspective?
So I mean, I guess like for us, we're fairly trusted because we're not like one out of many platforms that an event is selling on. Typically, we tend to be the only one that an event is sold on, and so the event organizer is driving the traffic to us. or the venue is or something like that. So that typically there's a level of, I guess, pre-approval already when it comes to the brand. And then obviously, like, if someone doesn't quite understand, like, they've never used the site before, they can go to the homepage, they can see which other events are on sale. So we're generally okay when it comes to consumer trust.
Hmm.
Obviously, like with a business trust, like, there's a level of like, are you going to crash before if my big event goes on sale? Do you have the stability of someone who is bigger and more established? And like that takes a long time because when you're building any tech, you think you've solved everything, you think that like you've architected it in the correct way, but then you realize that there's like 10 different bottlenecks, and you're going to have to discover those painfully one by one. As you solve one bottleneck, you get the next one. You realize that like a recent feature missed out a database index, and then that crashed the site because people were refreshing the page 10 times when they're trying to buy a ticket. Or like like it's one of those ones where also like the weakest link in the chain often is the problem, right? So it's like, did you size up your Redis cluster correctly? And that's the one that stores all the sessions. And if you didn't, then you have a problem because no one can stay logged in or the pages time out.
On that point, Ritesh, of course, without going into the nitty gritty and talking about the tech a lot, but how do you architect, the systems, so it doesn't break down under sudden demands?
I mean, every component has to have both scalability and redundancy. So, we run everything in a way where like there can be failover if one component goes down. Um, Anything you can make asynchronous goes into job queues. So if it doesn't need to happen right this second, it goes into into one of like 20 different job queues where things can get processed over time. Well, with a cap, this queue only has 3 different workers processing those jobs, and the rest can just can happen whenever. Order confirmations can be asynchronous. Like log storage can be asynchronous, right? As long as the logs maintain the original timestamp, it doesn't matter when they get processed, as long as they get processed. So we did a lot of stuff on that side to make things as asynchronous as possible, and
Mhm.
as like scalable horizontally and vertically as possible as well.
Now, speaking about, logs and, monitoring, I imagine there's a lot of real-time data that is flowing over there. And probably, and because we're talking also about AI, this data must have a use and just more than a dashboard for the event organizers. Like what kind of use cases we can utilize, or event organizers they can benefit from real-time data, which is it's flowing into the system real time.
I mean, I think that like we do things that are like way over the top. So like when the event organizer is in our dashboard, like they see in real time everything that's in shopping carts at the kind of second granular level, right? Like they go on sale and people are adding to carts, and before they've even entered a single piece of information, all the inventory that's locked kind of spins up into real time analytics, all plotted on a map where like usually that is not normal, but we take stuff out of the inventory locking and reuse the data for analytics. And we take a lot of like raw browser data and reuse it for analytics. And um, the and then you can also see like conversions happening in real time, and pixel data going to different ad networks. And the thing is like that kind of information, especially if you can replay it at a later date, becomes really useful for analyzing like, was our announcement strategy correct, which landing pages converted, we're the only events platform that I know of that lets you make
Hmm.
multiple landing pages for the same event. So there are multiple ticket pages for the same event, so you can A/B test traffic or send different audience segments. And so like there's some really interesting stuff you can do when you don't discard anything that's like, you would normally think, okay, why do I need to store browser signatures? But now you can actually tell the client, well, this many people are buying inside the Instagram embedded browser, and it gives them an idea of like where their traffic is converting best as well, um not just simple tracking parameters, but it's like, well, actually, someone is looking at this inside a private message or an ad or something like that, right?
Better insights indeed, of course. Now let's talk a little bit about the business model, Ritesh. And I know like you've processed more than $300 million dollars in ticket sales. What pattern do you see in what makes events profitable versus those that might not perform well, I would say?
I mean, I think that the general trend is that most events are not profitable for the first 3, 4, 5 years, especially if it's like say a festival or something like that. And that really is just like there's a trust level that comes from building an events brand, and it's just inherent in it's just the nature of the industry. Like you have to invest a lot into building a trusted events brand. Um, and it's not that different to building a tech startup. And so um Coachella, for example, wasn't profitable for the first 8 years, and now it makes hundreds of millions of dollars. So the key thing is, I guess, like knowing your audience, knowing that what that your product is, you've got product market fit in terms of your events. It's very similar concepts to running a tech company, um, but what you can do, and which is what we've tried to provide in the platform, is like best practices for marketing, best practices for conversion tracking, and all this kind of stuff that like use. We kind of try to encode the best practices for the industry into the tech, because when you start running events, you're doing it as a creative. You're not born with that knowledge, and usually you learn on the fly, and you probably waste a lot of money doing that. So if we
Right.
can encode the best practices into the platform and provide marketing automation, that really helps.
It's interesting because you mentioned about, the similarity. I mean, how it's not similar actually to tech companies, and but from pricing model perspective, we know that, this space have a lot of cutouts, right? So, there's a lot of layers in between. So how do you think about pricing in this space where margins are tight and with multiple intermediaries, I would say?
Um, Typically, an events company doesn't have budgets for SaaS subscriptions, typically, at least not
Hmm.
expensive ones. So with ticketing, usually what happens is that the fee for the platform is paid for by the buyer of the ticket, not by the event organizer. So
Okay.
they use the software essentially for free, and then all of the monetization is actually on the consumer side.
Hmm.
Um, because rather than saying to an event organizer, pay $20,000 a year or $50,000 a year for this very, complex tech stack, normally an enterprise customer would be able to pay that, but events cannot. So what you then do is you say, okay, well, if each ticket buyer pays $3, $5, $10, and that's spread out across all of them, then for everyone it's kind of like reasonable. But for the event organizer, they haven't had to spend that money.
Speaking about, the end user, the normal person who gonna buy this ticket, let's say it's me. So who owns the relationship here, Ritesh, in this space? Is it like you as the platform? Is it the organizer or the artist that I'm going to attend his or her
It's
concert?
us and the organizer. So yeah, we also kind of handle incoming customer service. Where the portal where the ticket buyer is going to go and manage their orders. They're going to resell them. They want to do upgrades. Um, so we do have a very heavy B2C side of the business, and so like we also like push out like editorial content, event discovery, industry news, culture and lifestyle news, and like we try to be like consumer facing as well. Um,
Hmm.
and so like yeah, it's interesting because like also it's very different from like a consumer app where like you might have to spend a lot of money marketing to get app installs, whereas with us, like the client is sending the traffic, and then we get a user, and it's quite nice.
Yeah. Speaking of this, do you think like this is by itself becomes the defensibility? Because when I speak with a lot of founders today, we know in the age of AI, building, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's becoming easier and maybe cheaper. So what will differentiate sometimes is this relationship that you have established with your customers, whether they are like the consumers or the businesses.
Mm.
Um, so are you seeing like the same trend in your industry, Tesh, where like the ticketing itself is a commodity, but the defensible part of the business is the relationship. Are you seeing that direction?
Yeah, I would say that it's more like that on the event organizer side.
Mm-hmm.
Network is very important. We have a lot of very well connected channel partners that introduce us to clients. The other thing is there's moats that you can have that are like more on the business side. So like, for example, we just announced in-platform banking, which we're about to launch, and that's like 2 years of negotiation because
Wow.
it's not hard to do that. Well, sorry, it is really hard to do that, but it's like it's like and then we announced at the end of last year a ticket for a capital product which allows events to get upfront um cash on their costs for booking artists based on like the previous revenue history that they have. And like there's over $100 million available there as that resource, and that takes time to negotiate. So there are business modes you can have that mean that are not codable.
Right. We hear a lot in your space, Ritesh, about how blockchain, Web3 can be a good fit. Are these like realistic signals, or like it's just noise in your opinion?
I don't believe in NFT tickets solving scalping or certain other things that it's been said to solve, because you can do that centralized quite easily. And you actually, if you make it decentralized, the only reason for doing that is if if the tickets are going to be listed on other websites. If you have no intention of doing that, then you don't need to do that, first of all. Secondly, you lose the data on the new buyers if things are resold peer to peer through smart contracts. And so you lose information by making it on chain and decentralized. Um, there are ways you can use blockchain in a good way. We added some layers over the years that kind of more realistic use cases, like token gating events where you need to hold a certain asset to be able to attend it because it proves that you are part of a community or something like that. So like we have that in the system where any event organizer can say, "Oh, this event is only accessible, or this type of ticket is only accessible to holders of these 5 NFT communities," for example, and you can put the smart contract addresses into the system and it will do automatic wallet checking. So things like that, blockchain makes sense for. If people are like, "Oh no, it's going to solve scalping," I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah, I like this, straight to the point realities that you are giving, Ritesh, and I agree with you because very obvious. Like people sometimes they just throw the technology for the sake of looking cool without
Yep.
reasoning. Is it really solving the problem that we
Yeah,
have,
here's
or
a
is it?
buzzword. I want to
I,
look like I'm with it, but like is it actually gonna it's like someone saying, "Oh, I'm gonna disrupt Ticketmaster by charging lower fees." And what they don't realize is that the reason Ticketmaster has those clients is because they have a lot of money to acquire the venue deals. They have those relationships. They own most of the venues that they are powering. They're running the concerts as well because it's a vertically integrated company. And then they're like us, some nerd comes in and says, "I'm just going to charge lower fees," and they'll be done for. And they don't realize that like they don't understand how the business works.
yeah, and we see it by the way in a lot of other industries. I've seen people like who thought like we quote unquote smarter. Yeah, we can be smarter than these guys. Like we will. Yeah, but it takes a lot, and it takes years to build also this, full stack. I would say whether it's like the technology itself or, as you mentioned, the venue
Yep.
and the marketing machine that you have. Now, as I was telling you before, we hit the record button. I have a lot of founders who listen to this, Ritesh, and as you imagine, like SaaS, although like a lot of people are out there, SaaS is dead, SaaS is going, but I don't think so. Maybe it's more vertical SaaS with the AI now. But
Mm.
what what would be the hard lesson they can learn from you building in this space where you are that would surprise them? That it's not like any similar SaaS story that we hear in books, in blogs, and articles.
Um, I think that like at the end of the day, most software companies have been built in a especially B2B software companies, have been built with fairly similar models, right? Like there are marketplaces, there are business management tools. Like there's so many different like project management software stacks. Like, you know, you have like Workday and Monday.com and then Asana and ClickUp, and like they're all fairly similar, right? Um, the key thing is like just understanding your actual customer. Like, what's the differentiator? That's like, what's the 20% differentiator that is going to make you more appropriate for this specific segment of customer than you know, the competition. I think that like it's really easy to try and do everything for everyone, and you end up overbuilding the tech. And I could probably say the same for us. Like we've built so many things. Like, should we not just like go narrow and sell to a specific segment?
Great insight again. Ritesh, if we want to zoom out, and of course, no one can predict future, and I don't like this question, although I still need to ask it. If we zoom out a little bit and to look at the future of live events from, tech perspective and the technology,
Hmm.
um, what are like some of the trends you expect to be kind of dominating in the, I would not say 5 years, but I would say in the coming 12 to 18 months from now?
So one thing that is generally, I guess, well understood in in the events industry is that the events industry is resource poor. It doesn't have the resources it needs. So one thing that we kind of knew that from the very beginning, you know, like events don't make enough revenue. They don't have experts in house. They don't have tech teams. So let's build the tech and let's build the best practices, right? And then over time, you kind of realize, okay, they don't have enough working capital. So let's build a capital product and find the solution to that. And then the biggest thing has been like, you know, most of the events companies in the world, bar like a very small number, typically only have like two or three full-time people, and everything else is like external agencies, contractors doing the event. They, you know, there's events that have like, you know, 1,000 people working at them, but they're all contractors that have been brought in like just for that, you know, 3 days or 5 days or something like that, right? And so the core teams are learning on the go. They're generalists. They're very passionate about the experiences they're creating, but they're typically generalists. And so, knowing that, like, we built out a custom agent stack, just announced it, that has like its own custom harness. We didn't use an off-the-shelf agent framework. Like we built that in-house. We built one in-house, and we created multimodal agents with skills based around event production, where we can basically say to an event production company, look, we're not taking anyone's jobs. You don't have the budget to hire those extra 10 people. You've only got the budget to have the 2 people or 3 people you already have. So let us be your extended AI workforce. And that way you actually get to compete with the guys that are bigger than you. And so we become now an enabler for growth. And like, I think that's a nice approach, because you're not cannibalizing real people's jobs. You're basically saying, well, you are very passionate, you are very visionary, but you don't have the budgets for the teams that the big guys do. So let us be that.
Like Ritesh, when you mentioned this about the generalist and now the AI agents, I found it, I'm not sure if you would agree with me, a lot of similarities on how marketing in the B2B space, which I was part of and somehow part of it. You know, when we have a marketing person in a enterprise technology, this is the space where I'm expert in. So actually, the same chain that we have, so for example, organizing the events and then like doing a lot of things. So these are like people who are just controlling, or let's say coordinating a lot of resources down the line. And I
Mm.
see a lot of similarities with the event industry, because actually people, they see the end results, but there's a whole chain that's coming all the way. And I don't know, like I felt there's kind of a, not similarity in the sense that it's the same business, but I mean operation is quite similar, which is, I'm just ringing a bell for my
Mm.
colleagues who are in the enterprise tech to listen to this from you, because it might be something useful for them. Ritesh, where are you operational today? Like, I know the answer, but just for the audience, like, are you like a worldwide operation? Where do you
Yeah,
focus?
we currently are operational in North America, a little bit of UK, Australia, New Zealand, soft launches in Southeast Asia, India as
Mhm.
well. And then we're about to officially launch in Dubai, which will be very interesting. And we've had a team in Dubai and an office in Dubai for a few years. But now we're official like Dubai government licensed, which is great.
Great,
And so
great.
that's gonna be fun to launch.
Exactly, it will be fun to launch, and I'm sure like this industry will keep booming in the coming few years from now. Ritesh, traditional question I ask at the end of each episode, like anything else you wanted to share and where people can get in touch.
Um, I mean, I think we've been pretty detailed, even though we haven't. We've compressed it into quite a short time. I think that the biggest thing to say is events are a lot harder than you think, so support them by buying tickets.
Yeah,
Because it's probably a year of planning and a lot of passion and a lot of capital that goes into producing these, and like there's a big trend recently to like leave ticket purchases to the last minute, or just stay at home and not go out, and like that it really hurts the industry.
yeah,
So yeah, buy early and support gigs. I think that's the thing I wanted to share.
yeah. Where to get in touch, Ritesh?
um Ticketferry.com, at Ticketferry on socials. Super easy.
Great. Just I want to repeat what you mentioned. As someone who, last year I was active in attending, entertainment events, and
Yep.
seeing the tears, blood, and sweat that everyone puts in there to, from the initial phase of announcing something all the way as us to buy the tickets and so on. So really, this is something worth for everyone to encourage this industry, because at the end of the day you try to because at the end of the day you just try to entertain us, which is, I highly appreciate it. So again, thank you, Ritesh, for being here with me today. And this is how I'm ending my episodes. By the way, the links that Ritesh mentioned will be in the show notes. If you are listening on your favorite podcasting app, you will find them in the show notes. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find them on the description. And this is how I end my episodes. This is for the audience. If you just discovered us, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, give me a favor, share it with more people. Like, invite more people to listen to the show. Let them subscribe to it also as well. If you are one of the people who keep coming again and again, thank you so much. Because of you, since last year, I repeat the same thing. I know, kind of boring, but I need to thank all people who make this happen, which is basically getting the podcast in the Apple Top 200 chart across multiple countries. We keep changing the countries, continents all the time. So this cannot happen without you. Thank you very much. And as I say, always stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.